Hello everyone, thank you for coming back to the channel. In today's episode, the story of Diem and CEO Tuan continues to unfold through quiet yet deeply emotional moments. After so many days of distance and misunderstandings, Diem returns to the familiar dirt path, the place where she chooses to wait for Tuan to pass by. No chasing, no forcing, no rushing, just staying there silently. And then what she has been waiting for finally happens. CEO Tuan appears same path, same familiar presence, but his memories have yet to return. There are no frantic embraces, no desperate running after him anymore. This time, Diem chooses to stand still, letting him notice her, on his own, letting him take the step closer. A wordless encounter. A quiet moment of sitting down together on the grass. And emotions that once felt familiar begin to awaken silently. Amid the loss of memory, a new connection is slowly forming, gentle, fragile, but more genuine than ever. Will CEO Tuan remember everything? And how much longer will Diem have to wait? Stay with us until the end to find out. If you enjoy these emotionally rich moments, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next episodes. Now let's begin the story. That morning came very early. A thin mist still hung in the air, and the cool chill seeped into her skin. Diem woke, while everything around her was still quiet and undisturbed. She sat on the edge of the bed for a long moment, as if questioning herself, then finally stood up, put on her jacket, and stepped outside. Today, she decided to go back to that dirt path, the path where she had reunited with CEO Toan after so many days apart. And also, the place where he had walked away, leaving her standing alone in the dew-covered grass. She walked slowly, one step at a time, as if any rush might cause her resolve to fade. The familiar path appeared before her, wild grass lining the sides, the bend that led toward the farm. Nothing had changed. Only her heart had. Diem chose a quiet spot by the roadside where she could clearly see the way he usually passed. She sat down, her hands clasped together, her gaze fixed on the distance. She carried no great hopes, nor did she dare expect anything certain. She knew only one thing: today she would wait. Time passed strangely slowly. Morning bird song rose and then faded. A light breeze stirred the grass. Each time distant footsteps sounded, her heart tightened, only to sink again when she realized it wasn't him. But Diem stayed where she was. She didn't call out. She didn't run after anyone. She believed that if he still walked this path, then as long as she remained there, sooner or later they would meet again. Just as Diem was beginning to think that today would end in waiting for nothing, a familiar figure appeared in the distance along the dirt path. He walked slowly, quietly, following the same road that led back to the farm where he worked every day. CEO Toan had no idea that someone was standing there waiting for him ahead. Diem spotted him from far away. Her heart started pounding, her breath catching slightly. But this time, she didn't rush toward him. She didn't call out his name in desperation like before. She stayed where she was, stepping into the middle of the path, letting the morning light clearly reveal her face. She understood now. During their last encounter, her panic had frightened him. She had held him too tightly, clung to him too urgently, as if afraid of losing him all over again. And that was what made him run. This time, she chose a different way to let him see her on his own. As CEO Tuan was about to pass by, he lifted his head. In front of him stood a woman, silent and still. He hesitated, his steps slowing. His gaze swept past her, then stopped, caught by a sense of familiarity he couldn't put into words. He didn't dare face her right away. His eyes wavered, his hand tightening unconsciously around the strap of his bag. His heart beat faster than usual, a vague uneasiness spreading through his chest. He didn't understand why this woman made him feel so unsettled. And then, after a few seconds of hesitation, CEO Toan slowed down even more, moving toward her one step at a time. No one spoke. Between them lay only the narrow dirt path, and a silence thick with anticipation, as if they both knew this meeting could no longer be avoided. As CEO Tuan came closer, the distance between them shrinking to just a few steps, Diem finally spoke. Her voice wasn't shaky or rushed. Like before, it was soft and slow, as if she were afraid of breaking this fragile moment. Do you really not remember who I am? The moment the question left her lips, CEO Tuan froze. He hesitated, his eyes wavering. A sudden sharp ache spread through his head, and instinctively he raised a hand to his forehead. Blurry images flashed through his mind, then faded like fragments of memories that couldn't quite come together. I'm not sure, he said quietly, his voice uneven. My head, it really hurts. Seeing this, Diem stepped closer at once. She lifted her hand, paused midair, then gently rested it on his arm. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to stay calm. In that moment, she understood everything. He wasn't trying to forget her. He truly couldn't remember. It's okay, she said softly, her gaze gentler now. Don't try to remember. Don't push yourself. She didn't ask anything else. She didn't search for answers he didn't have. Instead, Diem took one more step forward and gently wrapped her arms around him. This time, it wasn't a rushed, panicked embrace like before. She held him slowly, carefully, just enough for him to feel the safety of her presence. CEO Tuan stiffened for a brief moment, then gradually relaxed. His breathing slowed. Within her arms, a familiar feeling quietly made its way into his mind, unclear but undeniably real. He didn't know why, but he didn't want to push her away. A faint memory stirred within him. And for the first time, CEO Toan felt that he was standing very close to something that had once mattered deeply. Diem knew very well that he still couldn't remember anything. She could see it in his hesitant eyes and the sudden waves of pain that made him frown slightly, in the way he stood before her, like someone lost in the fog. More than anyone else, she understood that before losing his memory, he had gone through a shock so severe that his mind had closed itself off, refusing to let those memories return easily. That was why this time, she didn't dare ask anything more. No more pressing questions. No more trying to call the past back by name. No more forcing him to remember something when he clearly wasn't ready. Diem simply took one slow step forward and held him tightly. This embrace was completely different from the one before. It wasn't driven by panic or the fear of losing him again. It wasn't a sudden, overwhelming hug that startled him into running away. This time, her arms closed around him calmly and firmly, as if to say, I'm still here. I'm not going anywhere. And you don't have to run anymore. She rested her cheek against his chest, feeling the familiar heartbeat gradually slow. Her arms tightened just a little, not to hold him by force, but to give him a sense of safety, the very thing he had lost along with his memories. CEO Toan stood still. At first, his body remained tense by instinct, but after a few breaths, he slowly began to relax. The pain in his head didn't disappear completely, but it was no longer as intense. In the arms of this woman, he felt something strange, something so familiar that it made his heart sink softly. He didn't know who she was. He couldn't remember where he had met her. He couldn't name the relationship between them, but his body remembered. It remembered what it felt like to be held like this. It remembered the gentle warmth. It remembered something that had once been deeply important, now lingering only as a faint echo. Slowly, he lifted his hand, hesitated for a brief moment, then wrapped his arms around her in return. Not tight, not forceful. Just enough to answer her embrace like a reflex from a memory long lost, quietly finding its way back. In that moment, he no longer felt afraid, nor did he want to step away. Diem closed her eyes softly. Her tears didn't fall, not because she wasn't hurting, but because she had accepted it. Accepted that he couldn't remember who she was yet. Accepted that the road ahead would be long. Accepted that this love could no longer be rushed the way it once was. She simply held him silently. She didn't tell him who she was. She didn't remind him how deeply they had loved each other. She didn't say that he had once been her entire world, because she knew that if his memories were to return, they had to come back from within him, not from her words. On that quiet dirt path, the two of them stood holding each other for a long time. A gentle breeze moved through the trees, and the morning sunlight fell across their shoulders, soft and warm, as if the painful losses had never happened. For CEO Tuan, it was a strange moment, as though he had just touched a part of his life that had been lost. For Diem, it was the first time in a long while that she was no longer afraid he would turn and walk away, even though he still didn't remember, even though he still didn't understand. This time he stayed. The two of them remained there, standing in the middle of the dew-soaked dirt path. No one moved. No one said another word. The world around them seemed to slow down, as if even the air were holding its breath, afraid of breaking that fragile moment. Diem was still holding him. She didn't tighten her arms, nor did she loosen them. Her embrace stayed exactly the same enough for him to know she was there enough for him not to feel trapped. She sensed every small change in his body, the way his breathing was tense at first, then gradually steadied, the way his shoulders, once stiff, had finally lowered a little. She knew he was still confused, and she also knew he was trying not to run away. Inside, CEO Toan's mind was a vast, empty space. Not the kind of emptiness that feels cold and hollow, but something blurred, like standing in front of a dark room he knew he had once been in, yet couldn't find the light switch. Images flashed by too quickly, a smile an afternoon, a voice calling his name, but they all disappeared before he could grasp them. The only thing that didn't fade was the feeling of this embrace. He didn't understand why, but being held like this eased the pain in his head. It didn't vanish completely, but it no longer frightened him. As if something deep inside him was quietly whispering, "You're safe here." He didn't ask any more questions. He didn't pull her arms away. He didn't dare hold her tighter either. He just stood still, Diem opened her eyes softly. She didn't look at him right away, only at the ground beneath their feet. Dew clung to the grass, shimmering in the morning light. She suddenly realized how many times she had dreamed of this moment, dreamed of meeting him again, dreamed that he would remember her, dreamed that everything would return to the way it used to be. But now that it was really happening, her heart felt calmer than she had expected, maybe because she had already accepted it. Accepted that this love couldn't return through memory, but had to begin again through presence. "Are you uncomfortable?" she asked very quietly, almost like a breath touching the air. CEO Toan was silent for a few seconds. Then he shook his head slightly. "No," he said. "It's just, it feels strange." Strange how she didn't push, only asked, so he knew she was listening. "Like I've stood here many times before," he said, slowly searching for the right words. "But I can't remember who I was with." Hearing that, Diem's heart trembled, but she didn't let it show. She only nodded gently, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "It's okay," she said. "You don't have to remember." Those words made CEO Tuan lift his head slightly. He looked at her this time for a little longer. His gaze no longer avoided hers, though it was still filled with confusion. "Doesn't it make you sad," he asked, "if I can't remember anything at all?" Diem was quiet. Then she smiled softly, a small, honest smile. "Of course I'm sad," she said, "but I'm not afraid anymore." He didn't fully understand what she meant, yet something in her voice made his throat tighten. He couldn't understand why this woman could say such things with such calm acceptance. Silence fell between them again. The wind passed by, carrying the scent of grass and damp earth. In the distance, a car drove past, then faded away. But this dirt path remained quiet, like a private space meant only for them. CEO Tuan gently tightened his hand, not to hold her closer, but to keep this moment a little longer. He didn't know what he was holding on to, only that if he let go, he might lose something deeply important. Diem felt it. She didn't say anything, only leaned her head lightly against his shoulder. Not because she was tired, but because she wanted him to slowly grow used to this closeness, without pressure, without urgency. In her heart, there was a small, quiet promise. "Whether you remember or not, I won't pull you forward anymore. I'll stay here long enough for you to walk toward me on your own if you choose to." And so they continued to stand there, no past being named, no future being mentioned, only the present, quiet and fragile, yet real enough that neither of them wanted to walk away. CEO Tuan was the one who broke the silence first. He didn't say anything. He simply took a slow, deep breath, then stepped back half a step, as if giving both of them a bit more space. For a moment, Diem thought he was about to leave, and her heart tightened slightly. But then he slowly lowered himself onto the grass, leaning his back against a small tree by the side of the path. The movement was a little awkward, yet decisive, like he had just made an important choice, one he didn't fully understand himself. Diem froze. She didn't sit down right away. She stood there for a few seconds, looking down at him, as if she needed to be sure this was real, that he wasn't walking away, that he was choosing to stay. "You sit down," he said, his voice low and a bit rough. Standing too long must be tiring. It was such a simple sentence. But to Diem, it felt like a door had just opened. She slowly sat down beside him, keeping a small distance close enough to feel his warmth, but not so close that he might feel crowded. The grass beneath them was still damp with morning dew, cool to the touch. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, above scattering small patches of light across their hands. They sat side by side, shoulders nearly touching, yet neither leaned into the other. A long stretch of silence passed. CEO Toan lowered his head, staring at his fingers. He noticed his hand was trembling slightly, not from the cold, but because there were too many feelings inside him that he couldn't name. "It's strange," he said quietly. "I don't remember who you are, but I don't feel afraid when I'm next to you." His words made Diem press her lips together softly. She didn't turn to look at him right away, only gazed down the dirt path ahead where the sunlight was slowly growing brighter. "I think sometimes memories don't live in the mind," she said gently. "They live in feelings." He tilted his head toward her. He didn't fully understand, but he didn't argue either. "You're not going to ask me anything else?" he asked. Diem shook her head. "No. I'm afraid if I ask more, you'll hurt." He fell silent. In his mind, an image flickered. Someone had once said something similar to him on a distant afternoon, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. "Then, why did you come here today?" he asked, his voice slower now, more careful. Diem took a deep breath. "To wait for you to pass by." Her answer made CEO Tuan pause. He turned fully toward her, his eyes shifting slightly. "That's all." "Yes," she nodded. "That's all." He didn't ask any more questions, but something inside him stirred a sense of being waited for, of being important in someone's life, even though he couldn't remember who he used to be. The wind brushed through the grass around them. In the distance, voices called out from the farm, a reminder that time was still moving, that he was supposed to be at work. But CEO Tuan didn't stand up. He stayed seated beside Diem, as if this dirt path had suddenly become the safest place he knew. "Can you tell me a story?" he said, unexpectedly. Diem turned to look at him. "What kind of story?" "Anything," he replied. "It doesn't have to be about me." She smiled faintly. "Okay." She told him about mornings in the countryside, about days heavy with mist like this one, about the smell of wet grass and birds calling before sunrise. She spoke slowly, without dramatic emotion, as if telling an ordinary stranger about ordinary things. But as she spoke, CEO Tuan listened closely. He realized that whenever she talked, the pain in his head eased. Her voice didn't feel unfamiliar, even though he couldn't remember where he had heard it before. At times, he almost blurted out, "I know," but stopped himself, unsure where that feeling came from. When she finished, silence settled between them again. This time it wasn't heavy. CEO Tuan slowly placed his hand on the grass. After a moment, his hand brushed against hers by accident. Both of them froze, but neither pulled away. He looked down, then turned to her. "You don't mind, do you?" he asked softly. Diem shook her head. "No." His fingers closed slightly around hers, very gently, like a test. In that instant, a familiar sensation rushed through him, not clear, not fully formed, but enough to make his heart beat faster. "I think I've sat like this before," he said quietly. "With you." Diem didn't answer right away. She only nodded lightly. Maybe she said, but you don't have to remember it yet. He looked at her for a long time. His eyes no longer held the same confusion as before. Instead, there was a softening, a slow acceptance. So today he said, "Can I sit here a little longer?" Diem smiled. This time, her smile didn't tremble. "As long as you want." And so, they sat there together, on the grass, beneath the tree, along the familiar dirt path. No one stood up. No one mentioned where they were supposed to go. Just one person slowly finding himself again, and one person willing to stay no matter how long it took. The two of them stayed seated there on the grass beside the dirt path, as if time itself had slowed down to make room for a moment meant only for them. The morning sun had climbed a little higher, not as pale as it had been earlier, yet still soft enough not to glare. Patches of light quietly fell onto the grass, casting the shadows of two people sitting side by side, close enough that a slight lean would bring their shoulders together. CEO Toan spoke first, his voice low and unhurried, as if afraid to disturb the fragile calm. "Do you usually wait for me here?" Diem shook her head gently. "No, just today." Why today? She was silent for a moment. Not because she didn't know the answer, but because she didn't know how much of it to say. In the end, she chose the simplest truth. "Because today, I felt calm enough to stand in front of you." CEO Tuan lowered his gaze. He sensed that her words carried something much deeper, something shaped by a long journey he had no memory of. A strange feeling passed through him, like realizing he had once hurt someone deeply, even though he couldn't remember how. "Last time, he hesitated when you ran up and hugged me. I was really scared." Diem nodded. "I know. It wasn't because of you." He added quickly, afraid she might misunderstand. "It was because I didn't understand what was happening. All I knew was that my head hurt. My heart was racing, and I wanted to run." She turned to look at him. There was no blame in her eyes, no sadness, only softness. "I'm sorry," she said. "Back then, all I could think about was that if I didn't hold on to you, I would lose you again." He didn't respond. But somewhere in his mind, a blurred fragment stirred. A familiar sense of loss, like losing again wasn't something new at all. Silence fell between them once more. This time, CEO Toan shifted on his own, leaning his back lightly against the tree. The position made him more comfortable and brought them a little closer. He no longer avoided her. In fact, his shoulder brushed gently against Diem's. He realized he wasn't tense anymore. "Can you call me by my name?" he asked softly. Diem looked surprised, but she nodded. "Okay." "Tuan," she said, her voice light as the breeze. The name reached his ears and slowly spread through his chest. He closed his eyes for a brief moment. No clear images appeared, but a warm, familiar feeling rose within him, like someone had called him that way many times before, during quiet afternoons filled with peace. "Can you say it again?" he asked. "Tuan?" He opened his eyes and looked at her. "I don't remember, but I like the way you say it." Diem smiled this time, not hiding her emotion. Still, her voice remained calm. "Then I'll call you that until you get used to it." A gentle breeze passed by, carrying the scent of grass and damp earth. In the distance, The sound of delivery trucks from the farm echoed, reminding them that the day was moving on. CEO Toan glanced in that direction, then turned back to her. "I should go to work," he said, yet he didn't stand up. "Okay," she replied. "Whenever you want." He looked surprised. "Aren't you afraid I'll leave and not come back?" She thought for a moment, then shook her head. "I am afraid, but I don't want to hold you here with my fear anymore." Her words left him silent. A heavy feeling settled in his chest, like he had just been given a great deal of trust, so great that he didn't dare hurt it, even though he couldn't remember ever being trusted like this before. He bent down, plucked a small blade of grass, and rolled it between his fingers. If I ask you something," he said, "will you answer honestly?" "Yes." "Were we very close?" Diem didn't answer right away. She looked straight ahead toward the dirt path, stretching forward and disappearing around the bend. After a while, she spoke slowly. "We were everything to each other." He took a deep breath. This time, no headache followed, only a vast emptiness, like standing in front of a familiar house but being unable to open the door. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "for forgetting." She turned to him, her eyes softening. "You don't need to apologize. You didn't choose to forget." They stayed seated for a long while after that. There weren't many words, just presence. At times, CEO Tuan unconsciously tilted his head, almost brushing her hair. At times, Diem subtly adjusted her position so he could sit more comfortably. Everything felt natural, as if their bodies remembered what to do, even though their minds didn't. In the end, CEO Toan stood up first. He brushed the grass from his clothes and turned to her. I'll go to work," he said. "But will you still be here tomorrow?" Diem stood up as well, facing him. "If you want me to be, I will." He nodded a small nod, but enough to make her heart tremble. "Then, see you again," he said, as if testing out a familiar phrase. "Yes," she replied. "See you again." He turned and walked away, but this time, his steps were slower. Before reaching the bend that led into the farm, he stopped and looked back at her once more. No memories came rushing back, but one thing was clear within him now. He no longer wanted to run. Diem watched him until his figure disappeared completely. She didn't follow. She didn't call his name again. She simply stood there, placing a hand over her chest, where her heartbeat was slow and steady. She knew the road ahead was still long. He still didn't remember. Everything was still fragile, but today, he had sat down with her. And for Diem, that was enough to believe that one day he would return to this path on his own, not out of habit, but because his memories had finally found their way home.